record here. Okay. So anyway, we're here with the recent news, and the big thing that just came out just an hour or two ago is this new jailbreak from one of my ex-students going by Axiom X. He showed me an earlier version of this, and I partly understood it. But the point is, this works for all iPhones up to iPhone 8 and 10, and it can't be patched because it takes over the phone from the boot ROM. So this is really good for security researchers that lets you inside the iPhone. And so apparently this is really a big deal. I know he's been working madly for years on this. I could never get him to pay attention to anything when I talked to him except going home and running his giant cluster to generate more decryption keys for iPhone firmware. And this thing has gotten 1 million impressions on Twitter today and so on. So hitting all the major news. So
it's big.
Yeah, apparently it's really big. It's not the kind of thing that can be used to remotely take over your phone yet, but it does let people finally see inside the operating system, which has been very difficult. Anyway.
It's big too, just because nothing like this has happened in years, not since iPhone 4. So it's pretty impressive.
I mean, it's also impressive that it's one of our students in our community colleges.
Yes. Yes, I'm very proud of him. He went far beyond my classes very fast.
Interestingly enough, it's one of my old teammates from cyber competition teams when I was doing cyber competition. So we were pretty he's a really awesome teammate.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, indeed. Well, why don't you talk about Turnitin? Okay,
so Turnitin, this is interesting because I've had an interesting kind of a history with this. It's a utility that a lot of instructors use to check for plagiarism, and I've always thought that it was really stupid just because it's extremely expensive. It doesn't work very well. Like it'll do things like flag quoted sources, properly quoted and cited sources in student papers saying that they're plagiarism. And it's one of those things that I've always thought was one of the great like ed tech scams, because there's a ton of marketing and people are convinced that it's this panacea, but it's really not. And there's actually been some debate at our school over which of these services to use, and teachers saying, oh, my students have privacy concerns over this. How can I just shut them up and put that to rest? Well, those are pretty valid privacy concerns, for one, because these services take all essentially, if we use this as instructors, we're forcing our students to agree to surrender all of their intellectual property to these companies, because that's how they train their tools to flag plagiarism, as they assimilate everyone's writing into their database and then check against it. So it's really kind of sleazy. But what's really funny is, as with any sorts of mechanisms like this, there's always a workaround, and it's kind of reached the height of absurdism because this tool is supposed to prevent students from being able to submit papers that they bought online. But now the paper mills that sell these papers are added, that one of their value adds is that they're now checking, there's a utility where you can actually check your own papers against this plagiarism checker before you turn them in to see what they call the similarity score.
Yeah.
And so now the paper mills are using this. So it was pointless before, and now it's kind of laughably pointless because the very thing that it's advertised as guarding against, completely ineffective.
Well, this reminds me of another article I saw where a malware campaign was caught because the authors of the virus uploaded it to VirusTotal to see if it was going to get caught.
I remember reading that.
Which is, a misunderstanding of the concept.
Yes, exactly.
But it's certainly the case that any such tool will be used by both the good guys and the bad guys.
Absolutely.
I'm going to need one of these. I'm assigning term papers now, and I will need something because it is very clear to me that a large portion of students form a term paper by copying and pasting from Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And
So
defensive.
there's, you know, the workaround, there's a couple workarounds for this. So, you know, I've done some research into this as to what the right way to go is, since this is obviously an expensive and ineffective tool. The right way to go seems to be a combo of, and I have another article that you can add, a follow-up ad that has these suggestions in it, but the right way to go seems to be to, first of all, make assignments that your students actually want to do, because and most of the cheating happens when students are presented with assignments that you know, they see as pointless, busy work, stuff like that. So you want to give them stuff that's actually going to like make them think about doing it and actually, you know, incentivize them to do it. I think you do a great job of that. Second of all, one of the things that I like to do with this sort of thing, since I'm assigning a lot more papers now, is, you know, I like to talk about it with the student. You know, can you walk me through the process? Can you talk about it? If you can't talk about the paper you've just written, that's a pretty good flag right there to me that you probably either didn't write it yourself or just turned in some kind of copy pasta nightmare of other people's work. So, you know, I think that some of the workarounds for this are decidedly very low tech in this case. You know, have them do a presentation on their paper. See if they can talk about it with you for a couple minutes.
Okay.
I prefer the presentation aspect, just because, and at least in my classes, to submit stuff, submit a report from the tool that you used. So if your Nmap scan was 2 pages long, like, wait, did you find all the services? Did you find all the vulnerabilities, or did you just run Nmap as is and just said,
right?
Like, you know, but I like to push the soft skills more, just because that's always on the top of the list of the employers. I want soft skills. So okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure the best way to do it, but I am sure that my students need practice communicating in writing and communicating in a presentation, and they're trying to avoid it, which just convinces me more that they need to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus,
right.
You know, if you can, in the working world, like, you better be able to talk about your work. If you're submitting a report, if you're presenting a report to your company, which I worked at a company where I had to do that every time I shipped a product, and often had to do like status reports in front of the whole company every couple weeks. You better be able to talk about what you've written. So I think it only serves them well, and it also gives us as educators, gives us a chance to see, well, are they really mastering this stuff, or are they just kind of phoning it in?
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, you got one about Scotiabank here, Irvin.
Yeah, bank put their source code and their private logon keys into their repositories on GitHub for the world to see. I know, right? Just shaking head.
All the time, yeah.
This is the moment.
You
want to be photographed in a
Canadian bank. They somebody found those keys, and then I saw an article not too long after of, well, here's a tool that can do this job for you, and pointing back to this article. I was like, oh, that's great. People are taking advantage of seeing stuff like this and going, well, now I made a tool now that will help you scrape GitHub and give you this info.
Oh, yes, I've seen those. I think I've heard that GitHub is putting some automated detectors.
They are.
So they'll warn you if you do this, at least for new repositories.
Yeah, they're going to start doing that.
Yeah. It's a big issue when you move to the cloud.
Yeah. It's just one of those, shaking my head.
This is also it's kind of a classic example of like, hey, we didn't educate our staff, and we don't do code reviews. So
right. That shows their progress or their process in the back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I saw this one. I heard about it on a podcast. It's not new, but it was new to me. this student made the Robot Lawyers, which is an app that will help you appeal things like parking tickets, and it will help you set up credit card accounts that will automatically cancel at the end of the 30-day trial. But the part that I thought was interesting is this is caused by, I saw the same article earlier, and now they're telling me I can't see it. But anyway, this is by the son of the man who passed the Magnitsky Act, which is a lawyer who got killed in Russia in prison for exposing Putin's corruption. And this was the meeting that started the Russia scandal with Trump, where his son, that was what the people met with Trump's son during the campaign wanted, was to repeal the Magnitsky Act. The Magnitsky Act is named after the lawyer that was killed for exposing corruption, and it won't let you spend the money that you steal from Russia in other countries, which is why Putin's gang is so very, very angry about it. And the news reporting at that time said it had something to do with orphans or children or something, but that's not the point at all. I read the book Ill Winds, and they said that Russia, I think, is the king of government kleptocracy. 50% of the entire wealth of Russia has been stolen by their leaders. And they smuggle it out of the country, primarily to Britain and secondarily to the United States, where they spend it and buy property. And the Magnitsky Act is preventing them from doing that. So anyway, I was quite interested in that. And so since his father is a big political protester stopping government corruption, his small contribution of the son, who's at Stanford, was to help people appeal the smaller issues like parking fines and stuff. But I think it's a good idea. I mean, most law is just filling out the same form over and over and over. So it could just be a computer program doing that for you.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool and kind of interesting. I'm gonna check that out later.
Yeah.
It kind of segues into my next story a little bit, which is it was a story from Monday about a virus shutting down the computer systems in Union City. So it's interesting because it's not, they clarified that it wasn't ransomware.
Oh.
Or at least she said that it wasn't they said it wasn't ransomware several times. But they also said, we don't know how long it's going to be down. They discovered it like Saturday night, and it really affected all their payment processing facilities. Everything, and they don't seem to really know what's going on. And they say, okay, well, we can't process your payments online. Maybe you should come down to City Hall and pay, but we can't guarantee we'll accept your payments even then. And boy, they don't. This story does not inspire confidence. They clearly didn't have a plan. The only reason that their public safety systems weren't affected was that Fremont carries those out, not Union City. And, it's really telling because this is, this kind of a story is happening all over the place. We're reading about it, hearing about it because it's local, but it sure happens a lot. And, kind of the crazy thing that happens is in these situations, it's not really the agency that suffers, it's the public. It's the people that are trying to pull building permits. It's the people that are trying to pay their court fines or their child support. And I really hope that the city does the right thing in this case. Unfortunately, things I've seen in the past that happen are that they do not extend any consideration to people and still ding them for missed payments and stuff, even when it wasn't their fault, even when it was the fault of the agency that failed to maintain their system. So, something like this happened with our college assignment submission systems for one of my classes this semester, for our online course platform. And instead of putting it on the students, I give them extra time to turn in their stuff because it's only fair. So hopefully the court systems will act act ethically.
Yeah, there's almost no information here. This is a red flag to me when they say they're working with the FBI. That's what they said at City College in the fake one. The FBI doesn't do anything for these small issues. That's what you say when you just want to pretend it's somebody else's responsibility. Anyway.
Yeah, the FBI logs it in a report, and then it goes in a drawer. Is what happens there. I think.
Well, they can only do things that are critical national infrastructure or bigger than 6 figures of damage or something. And it sounds like they just shut off their own systems out of fear for something. This report makes it sound to me like nobody knows what's going on at all, and they don't even know.
That was the impression that I got too, and I think that. But the reason I picked it is I think that's very common. Yeah. The IT departments at a lot of government agencies and also at a lot of corporations are just completely clueless. They're not prepared for this kind of thing because it's not in their day-to-day. It's not in their part of their day-to-day work. It's not part of their training. So it makes them really attractive targets because the defenses just aren't there.
Right, they're just ill-prepared for it.
Yeah.
And no incident response.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No incident response, no training.
So, Sam, can you actually go to the last article? Because that ties with what we're just talking about.
Okay, Campbell County.
Yeah, Campbell County Hospital is down since last Friday because of ransomware.
And is that in California?
I do not think it is. No, it's 307. I don't think it is in California.
Yeah.
They went down on the 20th, and they haven't been back since. The last thing the last thing that came out was a Monday Facebook press briefing.
Yep.
That's like 18 minutes long, and that's it.
Nice. There's a red sign up there saying they're still down.
Yeah.
And you can come there. They want you to bring your medicine bottles because I guess they won't have a computer system to figure out what medicine to give you. You'll just look at the bottle.
Yeah.
No radiology, no x-rays. Wow.
Yeah, everything's still down.
Yep. And it would be so easy to prevent ransomware. It's so obvious. You could have heuristic detections for it. I certainly hope in the next year everything will have default ransomware protection in it.
You would hope.
My last story of the day is about that. So our last one we'll talk about a city that's actually doing something about it.
Well, that's good. Let me just go back to this one. Now, I hear a lot about these negative interest rates, and I finally understood what it is. It's just inflation. You can have negative interest rates mean that if you save your money, it evaporates, and that's the same thing if there's inflation and the price goes up. So the result is it causes you to invest your money. There's no point saving it, so you might as well invest it, even if the investments are fairly risky. And the argument from some economists is this is good for the economy. This will stimulate business instead of everybody just hiding their money away. So we'll see what comes of it. I know Trump wants a negative interest rate because he thinks it'll boost the economy, and I guess there is some truth to that. Of course, if he survives this impeachment stuff, he can certainly guarantee his reelection by just relaxing the China sanctions a few months before the election to make the economy go up. Nixon did something very similar to pump up the economy with deficit spending just in time to win the election. But I don't know if Trump is logical enough for that. He seems to be completely crazy. But anyway.
Maybe, but I suspected the same thing. Like from the first time that he started imposing those sanctions, that was my suspicion, that was the plan, to create a problem and then make a big show of solving it later.
But the way he's handled this whole scandal with Biden and Ukraine just shows that he actually believes this right-wing nutjob stuff. So he lives in a fantasy world. It's not fake. He actually believes that CrowdStrike has a physical server that they hid with the evidence about the fake Russian attack that they hid in the Ukraine. And this is all just a fantasy. So I don't know what planet he's on. It's fascinating to watch. When I was a kid, there was a bunch of people that read these chick tracts, and they believed that the devil was alive and the earth was going to open up and swallow people, and magic spells and miracles were happening, and they would vote based on this stuff. And Trump is that crazy, off in a fantasy comic book land, and his followers seem to be there too. So I just don't.
That's not a bad analogy.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're down. Let's down to Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, so last story that I have for the last main story, I have one more follow up on next week if we have time. But last main story I have is actually a success story. So it's about how certain communities in Massachusetts are actually responding to a lot of these attacks on municipal systems, and I think they're actually, they're headed in the right direction. They actually are training people. They're spending a lot of money. Counties have like a dedicated cybersecurity trainer. Several cities have a dedicated cybersecurity trainer now. The state has a cybersecurity training portal with courses to train employees on how to avoid phishing attacks, how to avoid getting, falling prey to a lot of the problems that set these things off. So I think it's interesting that, not everybody's kind of like throwing up their hands and running in circles. Some folks are actually making positive moves in the right direction on this.
I read an article that said that Estonia is the safest country in the world because the Russians attacked them so much they instituted training all the way back to high school. And after everybody understands what's going on, they're a lot safer. So apparently this can be effective.
Wow. That's cool. And I think it's cool that these guys too are, instead of just saying, oh, well, we'll just pay the ransomware, they're actually realizing the fact that you can actually prevent the damage from a lot of these and avoid paying that ransom. So they're they're actually doing things like making backups and and one of the stories in here that I think is interesting is that they talk about the town of Leominster and how they they had a ransomware attack, and attackers demanded like $10,000 in Bitcoin to restore their services. So, the city's like, oh no, we need to get our stuff back. Let's appropriate that 10 grand and pay the ransom. Well, they did, and then they still didn't get their stuff back because it just wasn't successful. Then they're realizing too that, okay, if we actually upgrade our systems and back up their servers, then this isn't going to be a problem. So,
well, I'm glad to hear it. I've heard from one of my friends that works in private business that everybody just pays the ransom. And even when you have backups, you still just pay the ransom because the backups are too slow and it's faster to pay the ransom. And I really don't like hearing that because, of course, paying the ransom just promotes the crime business.
Right.
So we need to make.
And the answer to that is to find a way to restore quicker.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Is that's the answer then? Is find a way to compress backups so when they go back on the network, it's fast.
Yeah.
Your preventative measures aren't any good if you're not going to deploy them. So.
Right.
But time is money, so you have to make so that the restoration is quick.
Yeah.
Though I think it's less of an issue. I mean, clearly, as we see with Union City, it's less of an issue with the government. So, I mean, I'm okay with it taking a little longer. But I don't think I think it's still trivial if you do it the right way.
Yeah. Well,
there are a lot of ways to optimize.
It would make sense to me if government agencies just had a law forbidding them to pay the ransom.
Yeah.
That would suit me fine. Anyway.
So I thought that was interesting.
Oh, yeah, it is. And here's email extortion.
Yeah. So there has been a revival and a rise of email extortion scams. Symantec did a review of 300 million emails and found, there's a rise again of these things.
The individual one, right, where they try to convince you that they've hacked into your account. Okay.
Right. And it's the same thing of phish to try to get you to do something, and then at that point, hey, I have your, like ransomware. You want it back? You need to pay me, and the same thing. It's the same thing as always. Just educating people to not click on that link or not do the thing that their gut is telling them to not do.
Yeah.
but to be aware that, hey, there is a rise of extortion scams right now, so be on alert.
Yeah, I just got a phone call half an hour ago here in Sri Lanka from a Sri Lanka number. I answered and it says, it's the Visa MasterCard Reward Center offering you money. So I don't know how this happens so fast, but I just hang up on them. But I think that's the education everybody has to know, to be skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
I keep getting those same emails too. And you know, when Irvin and I work with kids in the summer, that's one of the things I really emphasize talking to the students is, take this info home, help educate your grandparents and your parents and your aunts and uncles and your cousins, because the more people that know about these scams, the less successful they'll be.
Right.
And the less
just
successful
like
they are, the less common they
Estonia. Just like Estonia, teaching their young, hey, this is what it's going to look like. This is how to avoid it.
Yeah. Well, another one, which is also not new, but it was new to me. I saw a demonstration where they said they were getting Gmail accounts from a Wi-Fi pineapple, and I was offended because Google uses HTTPS, and they even know what the right certificate is. So you should not be able to do a man-in-the-middle attack and get anybody's Gmail account anymore this way. So I read this article to find out how this pineapple worked, and I learned more about it than I had before. I've seen them, but I've never really used them. The obvious one is what I knew, the wall of sheep feature, where you just look for unencrypted stuff on the internet. And that, of course, won't tell you hardly anything anymore because everybody uses HTTPS. But the second one is just social engineering. It puts up a page that looks like a Gmail login page, but it's not really Gmail. So your browser doesn't get a chance to actually stop you. That actually makes sense. And I think that would be very effective. I thought, and I haven't looked at it, but I think it won't even have the gmail.com address in the address bar, but that doesn't matter if people don't look. And there is no way, there's no technological defense against that. I was just thinking from a more technical point of view, to actually capture real gmail.com traffic and get in the middle would be very difficult, at least if they're using Chrome. Anyway.
Yeah, the Captain Portal modules, any module for the pineapple is easy to load.
Yeah, and if it just looks like a login page, then you'll get a bunch of credentials, and I don't think any technological defense will protect you. Again, the only thing that will protect you is education.
Yeah.
Another
always
thing
comes back to that.
Would help would be a password manager, because your password manager would not be fooled, and it wouldn't automatically fill in the page. So that might give you a clue that something's wrong here.
Right.
Well, okay.
Yeah, we use the pineapple at our county fair. We just had it on display to show, hey, if your cell phone is on and Wi-Fi's on, we're catching those beacons, and look, there's your house Wi-Fi listed there.
And did you get Gmail accounts and other things?
We did. No, we just had the listening feature on of the pineapple just to catch Wi-Fi access points, but we weren't doing anything else with it. But it is very easy. Once you have it in front of you, it's very easy to deploy.
Yeah.
I bet people were pretty surprised when you showed them.
Yeah, yes.
And if it's social engineering, then I guess it would be very effective.
Yeah.
All right. And here you've got, you had this, we talked about this one. Okay.
The last one I had was just a follow-up to Irvin's story. It was just a follow-up to Irvin's story from last week that I thought was pretty interesting, because this is an ongoing saga of these guys who are penetration testing the courthouse. And it's just been kind of interesting watching the details come out, because for one, this this company had worked with the courts before, so they were a returning vendor, and it seems like there's just a cascade of screw ups on all sides here. Now they were authorized to be doing what they were doing, but not necessarily when they were supposed to be doing it. The one thing that stuck out to me where the penetration testing firm messed up was that it said in their contract that their testing services were going to be carried out between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. with other times possible with a change order, but they never filed any change orders. So these guys showed up at midnight. And I thought that was their main screw up. If they had just filed that change order, I'm sure there are plenty of project managers around the country face palming right now because this kind of thing happens a lot of the time. It causes problems. They just filed it, they'd be all good. But screw ups on the other side, I mean, they'd be good legally. Screw ups on the other side were, the sheriffs that arrested them they told the sheriff what they were doing, and then the guys that were running the penetration test had their get out of jail free card. They had their authorization letter with a contact person who is a state official that's not named in this article. So the sheriff that finds these guys burglarizing the courthouse calls the state official. And they say, yes, they're supposed to be there. Also, this is a secret pen test. Please don't tell the other sheriffs because we want to see how many people we can break through. And the sheriff arrested them anyway, and then said that he was going to email every sheriff's department in the state, which he did about it. He said he would not keep it secret. So I think the whole thing is pretty interesting. Even though this state official said let him go, the sheriff said, well, they're not, that state official has no authority to authorize these people to break into the building because they're the state and we're local. So nobody can seem to agree on who's allowed to authorize this sort of thing.
And I would see how the police would see this as all like false alarms and wasting their time, and probably rightly so, and wonder if it's really okay to.
It seemed like it was the opposite of that. It seemed like the police were taking it overly seriously and
the
failing.
higher-ups are like, just let it go.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder how much, if you catch a real crook, they could just say, oh no, this is a pen test.
That's true. That's true.
It's like cops probably assume whenever you give them some weird excuse, they say, yeah, sure, buddy, we're locking you up.
Right. But interesting
and I
that
suppose you could put just anyone's phone number on that get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
And call him up and say, oh yeah, I'm the governor, let this man go.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. I guess we got, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, we're somehow a little out of order, but I think that's all of them. All right. Well, thanks. I guess I'll see you folks next week. I'll be back in town. We can probably be at our usual time.
Great.
Cool.
Farewell.
Right.
Bye-bye.